And we are live. Welcome to another Do As We Do live, where being unprepared is the caregiver's worst enemy. We believe in starting the family conversation early, and we're on a mission to break the chain of unprepared caregiver cycle because we remind you it's not about if they die, it's about if they live. I'm Jeff Durstock, and I have Sam with me here tonight. And we're here to bring you another very special guest this evening. We are live on the Do As We Do Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and we really appreciate you joining tonight. As always, our goal is to bring you a ton of valuable content each and every week. We're working on more incredible guests to just keep bringing you some really great content to educate, as well as we ask that tonight, if you can ask questions in our comments section, it helps us know what's important to you. Also, please like or subscribe our Facebook page. And lastly, this is the only thing we need from you. Everybody knows potentially somebody that's going through this, as well as if you know someone that would value from today's show, please share the Do As We Do Foundation with them. And this episode specifically, we believe in getting the word out about this message. So tonight we'll be speaking with Stephanie Erickson. She's a media commentator, a family caregiving expert, and an author of her brand new book, Plan for Aging Well. Sam, do you want to give us a caregiver introduction?
Yeah, so just to remind everyone, our definition of a caregiver is someone who regularly assists a loved one with their daily activities because of old age, disability, disease, mental disorder. According to the National Alliance of Caregiving and the AARP, there are 43.5 million unpaid caregivers that do this every single day in the U.S. This problem, creates a huge burden for caregivers, whether they are local, living with their loved one, or they're remote, like our fearless leader, Kimberly, helping their loved one remotely. That is what we would define as a caregiver. And because of this problem that exists out there, because there's over 40 million people that deal with this every day, we created the Do As We Do Foundation. Our goal is to provide valuable content and guidance to help caregivers become better prepared, to build a support community and empower caregivers to find the resources that they need, and grow a monetary fund to provide financial assistance for unpaid caregivers that are in need. And with that, we've also created the Caregiver Relief Fund. I think Jeff's going to tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, in this economy, many caregivers have lost incomes. They're desperately in need of help for themselves and their homes. They're caring for a loved one, and they're just trying to make ends meet, right? And that's, as Sam mentioned, why we created the Caregiver Relief Fund. We've been raising money really this year to put that help in need for anybody that needs it. We also know that there is a need, and it's okay to ask. If you or a caregiver who needs the help, a little help to make it ends meet this month, please request any kind of assistance from our website at DoAsWeDo.org. We do have a confidential application process, and everything's there to get what you need. Approved Shield, who's a big sponsor of ours, helped us get that application up and running. And with their help, we're getting the funds to the right people that need help today. You may not know them or their story, but you can make this chapter of their life so much better. And to help a caregiver in desperate need, go to DoAsWeDo.org or go to our Fundly page and donate today. So with that said, let's get the conversation started today. I'm both Sam and I are extremely excited to welcome Stephanie Erickson. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
And Stephanie will share key insights on caregiving and aging based on her 25 years of experience in social work.
Hard to believe because I know I look like I'm only 25, but
you started when you were really young.
I did. I was only 3.
I like it.
So tell us, your story, a little bit about your background and your experience.
Related to work or just as me personally?
Related to your background with your social work and your personal background too.
Well, I grew up in California, and I got my bachelor's and master's degree there, and then I moved to Montreal, which is where I live now. But I didn't move here till 2003. But even back in graduate school, getting my master's in social work, I started working with families who were caring for somebody. I've worked with caregivers in a variety of situations throughout my entire career. That's what social workers do. So everything from, kids in the foster care system, so working with, foster parents, or working with the parents who were trying to get their children back, palliative care, domestic violence, homeless shelters. I've worked with kids directly. I've done a lot of different kinds of work, but always working with families that are having significant issues and those who are trying to support them in some way or another. And the last 15 years here in Montreal, I've had my own business, and I'm working with individuals that have dementia and their families. So that's been my specialty for 15 years. Or longer, 16 years.
Quite a background.
Yeah. All in since I've been 3.
So, in your, you've dealt with all aspects of caregiving. In reviewing your book, you mentioned that, or one of the things we talked about yesterday on the phone is that we need to look at, kind of change the way we're thinking about aging and go to aging as a team. And that really stuck with me because it was, it gave me a different perspective, a different way to look at it. So explain what you mean by aging as a team.
Well, you'll hear caregivers say this all the time. They'll say, I'm going to speak about aging right now. My mom's getting old and she needs help. So already now the conversation from the adult child is already about one person, the mom. And there's no acknowledgement of, but I'm struggling and now my kids are impacted and I'm having problems in my workplace. And my dad is also struggling because he's trying to care for my mom. Right away, we get this tunnel vision where we just go right to and I'll use the term patient, even though it's not always a patient, but right away we kind of get this tunnel vision. And even when we walk into healthcare professionals' offices, it's the same thing. A family goes to see the doctor for someone who, let's say, has dementia. The doctor gives interventions for the person that has dementia. And there's rarely questions about, how are you doing at home? How is it impacting your family? Are you having trouble financially, like with the funds that you're trying to raise? We're not doing any of that. So my hope with this book is that we start to learn to work together as a community, family, friends, healthcare professionals, everybody working together with the common goal of supporting an older adult and the entourage of people around him or her.
It's interesting. Definitely a different way to look at it. Do you find that most of the people that you work with, that they're truly prepared for their need to, the patient, as we'll say, or that they're prepared to actually need the care, that they thought about this, still we're talking about aging and, someone that knew it may be coming. Do you find that they're prepared and that their loved ones are truly prepared?
No. And I just, like, on a side note, I don't mean to make a joke about it, but you said, for someone who thought about that they might need something like that. Well, we're all aging. So for anyone who thinks that isn't about them, it's ridiculous because we're all getting older. So we know it's happening and there's really no excuse for us to not be prepared. But I do find that most people are not. There's a very small percentage that have had some really good proactive conversation. There's a larger percentage that have legal documents in place, but what they haven't done is have the discussions about the legal documents, about the execution of the legal documents, the financial implications. So it's all of these like, oh, but I did my document. Yeah, okay, here's your document, Mom, but how am I supposed to spend your money? You don't have your priorities in there. You don't have your expectations. It's not clear. I don't know what to do. So I think we have a lot of work ahead of us in terms of families and having some really important and deep conversations. And I think it's up to healthcare professionals to start prompting people to do that as well.
Yeah.
You mentioned like conversations with loved ones, like any advice from your perspective? Because obviously those conversations can turn difficult. Like, you're talking about things that are outside of the norm, and some people are afraid of that. Like, what advice could you give in that area?
Well, and even within my own family, my dad, he's unfortunately, he died suddenly. And for years, I tried to get him to talk about stuff and he wouldn't. So even myself as a professional, there are people who just won't. And there are cultural implications where talking about things is kind of jinxing it or wanting it to happen. And so there's all of those factors. So there are some things to think about in conversations. But advice that I would give people, number one, is to listen. Because I think our loved ones, our families are giving us messages about what their moral compass is, what they want in terms of their value systems, their belief systems, what's important to them. We're hearing that in everyday conversation with our loved ones. So there is some insight that we can gain, and a place, kind of like a starting off point in which we can begin a conversation. But if something is a bit too difficult for someone to initiate, I always suggest for people that they start with something very removed from themselves. So it's like, oh, I saw this interesting interview on Facebook last night, Mom, they were talking about this. So removed from the family members. Or I saw this movie, Mom, you should watch it. It's so heartfelt. Watch it, Mom. And then ask Mom, what'd you think about the movie? And the mom might actually start saying, oh my God, it was horrible how they put that mother in a nursing home. How could they do that to their kids? Well, now you've got a message right there. So I say start removed, and then you can slowly make it more personal. So it's about, people we don't know to people we kind of know, like neighbors, and then to friends and family who we know really well. And then it can be like, okay, this is about us. And it's not one conversation, it's a series of conversations over many years, and listening along the way.
Yeah, listening is key. But I do like that idea of, sharing an external source that maybe spark that conversation, or kind of like remove that personal connection piece that, it makes it easier to talk about.
I've definitely experienced doing things like that with my parents, where I suggested them directly, and it's instantly a wall, and you get frustrated and want to scream, and then suggested another way, and it works. So hey, that's the way they parented me. They had to do that with me, so I may as well have to do that with them on some things as well.
But Sam, you're bringing up a good point, because timing is super important, right? And we know that as parents with our kids, we know that with our spouses. Like if my husband walks in and he's, I almost swore, he's complaining about his boss, let's say, for example. And then I say to him, honey, I really need to talk about something with our budget. I mean, that's probably not the right timing for us to talk about our budget when he's frustrated with his boss. So I think we need to keep in mind the timing of things and revisiting conversations. Again, not thinking like, oh, this is a sprint. It has to happen right now. No, this is a marathon. We need to just take our time and slowly get used to people to having these really difficult conversations.
Yeah, and in your book, you talk about building a caregiving team, and in my case, it's not just me. I have a brother as well. He's not here locally, but he's not terribly far away. So when it comes to the future of my parents needing care, he would be directly involved as well. So can you speak to the importance of building that caregiving team and
he cut out. I don't know if you.
There he is. He's back.
Okay. Sam,
Yes.
you said, can you repeat the question, because you froze?
Oh, okay. Sorry. A cow walked between me and the cell tower, probably. So, I was saying, it's you highlight the importance of building a caregiving team. And in my case, I have a sibling, a brother, and he would be directly involved, when my parents do need care one day. So can you just speak to, the importance of building that team and some helpful hints, tips of how to best do that, how to best go about it?
Well, speaking as a Jewish woman, guilt works really well in my family. And appealing to my mom that, don't you want your children to get along? But kind of at that level, I'm making light of it. But I think when we're talking about adult children working together, I have seen some really horrendous situations. I'm often an expert in these really conflictual files with, adult children fighting, which at the end is typically about money more than anything else. But there's a lot of things that can happen. And I think it's important for the parents, when they're putting their wishes in writing, which hopefully they are, that they are transparent with both of their children, even if they're going to rely on one child over another for a particular task. We need transparency, because at the time that there's a crisis, at the time that someone needs help, you don't want your adult children fighting with one another. Every parent wants their kids to get along. Every parent wants their children to have a close relationship. And we can really do something as parents to create that with our children if we have those proactive conversations and put our wishes in writing. It is very helpful. And in my book, I outline some additional clauses that can be added, not in a legal way, but just the ideas of, and you'll have to obviously ask an attorney how to write it in a legal way, but additional clauses to help minimize and reduce that conflict later on. There's a lot of things that we can do to help it. So when there's a crisis, you and your brother, for example, will get along and be on the same page.
Yeah. I mean, transparency goes such a long way. It just makes, and to your point, like in a time of a crisis, like no one really has time to like, okay, let's talk about this. It's really like, what action do we need to take? So having that transparency up front, I mean, it just makes things easier. And, I've shared in past conversations that, we're approaching this and my family and that has been, something that we've really strived to do, like in those conversations, just be transparent with each other. So, definitely feel that message needs to be heard. So in talking like communication between family members, Stephanie, like obviously like in terms of if that communication's not going well, obviously there's different family dynamics and lots of cases. Like how do you feel that may impact whether you say patient or family member and whoever that case is, like how could that impact their care?
Well, 100% it does, because even for someone who has dementia, let's say, you can sense what's going on. Our body can feel things that our mind may not understand or our words cannot express. And so when there's tension with the adult children, believe me, the senior feels it. The older adult feels it, or whoever the family member is, it's felt. So there needs to be some really good communication. And I think when the conflict starts to arise between the outside family members, meaning I'm using the term patient just because it kind of makes more sense. We don't get confused. But So let's say the people caring for that patient, is that when the communication is going well with the family members, fine. But when it's not, we need to, again, kind of go back away and remove ourselves, because our egos, let's face it, we all have super big egos. That's why my book is like behind me right here, right? Because my ego's like, hey, people, check out my book. So, I mean, our ego is always driving things. So we need to sort of check out of our ego place. And if we can both just as adult children say, okay, what do we both want for mom? We want mom to feel safe. We want mom to feel happy. We want mom to be getting all of her needs met. I would be hard pressed to find an adult child who doesn't agree with that. So it's kind of like finding that common ground in a very removed way from the actual execution of decisions, and then slowly working your way into actual decision making.
We often on our live cast, we talk about how, caregiving can kill the caregiver. And like you were saying, in some cases, there may be multiple caregivers, multiple family members, but one is relied on more heavily. I see that quite often, especially in my extended family. And I know you talk about that in your book. Can you speak to that, like how important it is for the caregiver to take care of themselves and consider their own health?
Of course it is. And even us saying that, every single caregiver knows that their own health is important. It's not like they need to hear that again. They already know it. It's just actually doing something about it. And there's so many factors involved with caregivers not taking care of themselves. A lot of it is because they're afraid that what they do is the only way to do it. And we all fall into that trap in our daily life anyway. I'll go back to a budget. Well, maybe my husband might do his budget one way, I do it another way. We're both convinced our way is the right way. So then we don't want to share the particular task. And the same things happen with caregivers, is that they think I'm the only one who could possibly manage this situation. But as we know, if a caregiver burns out and gets sick, then that care recipient, that patient, who's going to take care of him or her? And so that's why it's so important for caregivers to proactively get themselves help and support. And there are lots of different ways to do it. I don't know if you want to get into that now, but I do have a video on my YouTube channel where I talk about actually some suggestions about how caregivers can reach out and ask for help. Do you want to get into all those details now?
We can definitely talk about that a bit. It's very, very important. I mean, I know personally, I have a cousin that took care of her parents, and it broke her. And when she broke, they had no one to take care of her. So yeah, definitely dive in.
Okay, so I think first caregivers can just start with making a very detailed list of all the things that they do in any particular day, week, month. Really little tiny things, from water the plants in the house to a bit bigger tasks. I do the grocery shopping and cooking. I do the laundry, to more physically and emotionally intensive tasks, like I'm assisting someone with a bath, to driving someone to a medical appointment. List every single thing that a person does. And then look at that list and say, okay, what kinds of things would I might be willing to give up? What kinds of things do I think someone else might be able to effectively do? As I get used to delegating, what would I be willing to give away? And then you can reach out to particular family members and ask them to do those particular things, and be specific, because a lot of times people say, well, sure, I'll help, but then the caregiver is not specific, and the person doesn't say. So I would say be really specific. But I think it's important for the caregiver to also recognize that everybody has their skills set. So I'll give you an example. Now, this was after the death of my father, but after he died, he had no arrangements at all, no funeral arrangements. He never said what he wanted. His finances were a mess. All of this was happening. My sister doesn't have the skill set to organize the finances, close out accounts, get all that stuff doing. That's my skill set. What she needed to do was plan the party, and she's really creative. So we respected what each of our skill sets were, and we let each other do whatever was natural for us. And I think that's important for a caregiver too. Not everybody can give their mom a bath. And it might make you angry, and you might feel like it falls on you, but not everybody can do it. So if the person can't help you with a bath, what can they do? Maybe they can be your virtual assistant and look online and do a search for all the safety products that are out there and send you the top 3 things, or just go ahead and buy those, bring them over and install them, because they'd rather just do and execute a plan. So I think that's some of the more simple and, I guess, easy ways that caregivers can ask for help.
Yeah. I think that's really important. I mean, to your point, everyone always says, hey, how can I help? But if you don't kind of have that thought process, it's very difficult to be like, well, let me get back to you. And then if you never do that, you may find that you're just in that same experience each and every time. So I think that is incredibly helpful to think through that process, so that you can figure out what you're willing to trade off.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Exactly.
We've talked a lot about, scenarios where a loved one's being taken care of at home, but that's not always an option for everyone, or depending on the loved one's condition, it's just impossible, and they have to go to some type of care facility. I know you've dealt with people in those scenarios. Do you find that people are just completely blindsided by the cost of going into some type of care facility, especially if they want privacy?
Yeah, exactly. And, even Sam, to back up, even the costs at home, right? Because there's a lot of things, equipment and other things that you don't expect that you're going to need, or protective undergarments or medical equipment, outfitting bars. And so many things can come at us, all these costs that, insurance won't cover, travel, paying for parking at a hospital when you have to get dialysis 3 times a week, and all these kinds of things add up. Backtrack for a second. That's why planning is important, putting it in your legal documents and putting some funds aside to help your caregivers cover their costs of these things. That's kind of on this side. But yes, going into a residence, absolutely. A nursing home, whether it's full care, assisted care, whatever it might be, is extremely, extremely expensive. Of course, some might have some sort of a supplement, but you cannot even imagine. Obviously, across the country, there are different costs. But some people might be spending, $80,000 a year, $90,000 a year, $100,000 a year to pay for care for a room that they're sharing with someone else, a bathroom that they're sharing with someone else that includes 1 bath a week. It's incredibly, incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
Sam, can I just? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, the sticker shock is real.
Yeah. Sam, I just wanted to back up, because one of the things you said when you were asking me that question was when the loved one's illness, it's just not possible to care for them at home. So now that statement is about when somebody's illness makes it impossible. But we also have to think about personalities. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Not everybody has a personality. Even if someone's illness, they could be at home. Not everyone has that in themselves to be able to do that. And caregivers should not feel shame or judge themselves or feel guilty if they're not built that way. That's fine. They can be built another way. We are all different. We all require different things to make ourselves comfortable, to feel good. And so I just want to be clear that the caregiver can also decide that maybe that's not the right fit for them too.
That's a very important point. I think a lot of caregivers are thrust into caregiving and they inadvertently skip that step. They don't get the time to really think about it, and before they know it, they're in it. But it's important for them to calculate what it's going to do for their life and their family, their immediate family.
Exactly.
And that's why, between like why you're joining us and the mission, the preparedness and the awareness is like, really at the foundation of what we're trying to do. If you think about like the crucial things of someone, let's just say in their 40s or their 50s, like what should they be doing now to prepare for that?
Starting to think about what is important to them, mind, body, soul. And we haven't even got to that because that's a big part of my book as well, is talking about a holistic approach, that we're not just a body, we're much deeper human beings. But I think in our 40s and 50s, we need to start thinking about what makes us feel fulfilled and loved and cared for, and start sharing that with our loved ones and our children if they're old enough to hear it. Certainly everybody at any age can have, legal documents put in place. My husband and I have had our documents in place for 15 years, and I'm not anywhere near a time when I'm going to be incapable of caring for myself unless there's an accident, which is why I put the documents into place, because we don't know what's going to happen. So certainly in your 40s and 50s, you can be doing that. I also think we need to be thinking financially about what we can do to start preparing for what we might need later. And so I recommend that people sit down with a financial advisor who knows about those later years in life and can help to facilitate conversations about what's important for somebody. Do they imagine that they would want to stay at home as much as possible? What would those costs look like going into a care home, if that's what needed? What do those costs look like? And starting to set up some sort of a plan to get there. But I think it's an ongoing conversation all the time that needs to just be adjusted and changed over time as we're all aging.
Yeah, we kind of touched on this earlier about trying to start the conversation, but what are some things that adult children can do to I guess more or less nudge their loved ones, their parents or their elders, to get them to start preparing and talking and just get the discussion started?
Yeah, and nudging is what it feels like for a lot of us. Like I said with my father, I mean, I nudged him all I could, and he still just would not talk about it. So some people you'll never get them to talk about it. Right. And for other people, as I said, it's just an ongoing conversation. And I think I made a joke about, appealing to guilt, but it's, Mom, I want to help you in the best way I can. You've taken care of me my whole life, and I want to know what it is that you expect me to do when you're older. Tell me what it is that you want me to do when you're older. How do you want me to help you? I want to be getting along with my brother. I want to be getting along with my sister. So to help us understand how to care for you. We don't want to be left in the dark. We don't want to have a crisis. And just, again, slowly over time, hopefully those kinds of conversations will happen.
Absolutely. Makes sense. One of the quotes in your book that I loved the most was, I think it was near the end where you said, "The time is now." And that goes to a lot of things. But just speaking to that, the urgency of it, the importance of it that people tend to neglect when it comes to preparing.
Well, part of that, the time is now, I think that's the last line of my book, actually. Mm-hmm. Part of that is about having proactive conversations. The time is now. It can start tonight and it can go on for the next 10 years. But also part of that urgency of the time is we need to rebuild the system. I mean, COVID opened our eyes, well, not my eyes, but a lot of people's eyes, of how horribly we're treating seniors, the amount of money and resources we pour in, how they're neglected. They really are just cared for as a body. As I was talking about, the mind, body, soul, that piece is not even integrated into care, or very rarely integrated in care, and only into small amounts. So to me, the time is now for all of us as a society to step up and say, we demand more. We demand better. I am a whole human being. I demand to have emotional and psychological and spiritual care as I age. It's not just about making sure I get a bath. It's making sure that I feel comforted. I feel safe. I feel valued. I get to share my life. I get to process my life, because as we age, there's this psychological process going on of reviewing our life, and regrets and remorse and making amends and all of these kinds of things, forgiveness. And when we're not given that kind of love and care and support as we age, it makes our death painful, physically painful, emotionally painful, spiritually painful. And it causes conflict as well later on amongst families.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a complete absence of, the way we treat seniors in this country and many other places, it's deplorable. It's a very broken system, but there's a complete absence when it comes to the psychological aspects of it. I mean, we just literally are just keeping them going in so many cases, and not doing enough for them to make them their final years happy as they can be.
Exactly. I was telling I'll just give you an example that I always, I talk to my kids about. I just want to give an example of spiritual support. I know we're running out of time. Can I tell you just an example?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So in my book, I talk about this as a place that makes me feel connected. Now, I'm not a religious person at all, but I tend to feel like I'm a spiritual person. And for me, that just means, where do you feel the most at peace? Where do you feel the most connected to yourself and to the world and to humanity? And for me, that's the beach. So I am already starting with my children, who are only 15 and 12, saying to them, if mommy's ever ill and mommy can't get to the beach, bring the beach to mommy. Fill a bucket of sand, bring it, put my feet in it, warm it up, put my feet in it, like as if it's the hot sun. I want to hear the sounds of oceans in my room. I want to smell some salt water. I want to hear music of kids laughing in the background as if I'm at the beach. Create the beach in my room, because that's my spiritual place, and it's going to give me spiritual comfort, even if I'm stuck inside a house or in some sort of a residence. So that's what I mean. And those are such like quick and easy fixes for all of us to do. And none of us are doing it for seniors, where it's like shoving them in the corner in the wheelchair, having them stare out the window. It just drives me crazy.
Totally agree.
I think, thinking about that aspect, like it's not something I think about, but like hearing it just opens your eyes to the possibilities and how that can definitely change the emotional aspect. So I appreciate you sharing that. All right. Well, tell us. So the book, it's coming out. Plan for an Aging Well. When is the release date, Stephanie?
Tuesday, September 29th. It's coming up. A couple days.
That's awesome.
And I can say personally, I've only gotten to thumb through it, but I'm like, it was hard to thumb through because I wanted to read everything. I can't wait to go back and read the whole thing.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it. And you can get it. You can go to my website, which is stephanieerickson.ca. I think you guys put the links up there. You can, Google Plan for Aging Well with my name, Stephanie Erickson. You'll find it. And as of the 29th, it will be on Amazon. And again, just Google Plan for Aging Well, stephanieerickson.ca, or you can follow me on any of the social media channels. And obviously, I'm posting links constantly about how people can find the book.
Right.
Yeah.
And we'll be sure to put that in our comments, for everyone that's watching this after our live. So
thank you.
Yeah, we're excited for you with the book, and we're excited to have you. You are, in learning about you, you are a wealth of information that's very specific to our entire mission. So we would love to have you back on sometime, and
of course,
probably take 10 shows to cover everything we'd love to cover with you. But thank you for joining us tonight, and we hope to have you on again. Thank
you. It's my pleasure. Anytime.
So just a reminder to everyone, the DoAsWeDo Foundation is here to provide support and assistance to existing caregivers and to create awareness for those that may become caregivers. At some point in our life, most of us, at least in this country, are going to need care. So we want to get the conversation started, have people start discussing it earlier. Caregivers, unpaid caregivers, which there are over 43 million of them in this country that do it every day, are extremely at risk financially, especially during the current crisis. So we've created the Caregiver Relief Fund. You can donate through our website, DoAsWeDo.org. All funds from that do go to caregivers that are in need to help them pay for medications, electric bill, help them pay rent. Many of them are currently unemployed. And also, if you are a caregiver that's in need, or you know a caregiver that's in need, send them to our website, DoAsWeDo.org, and they can apply there. There's a secure application process so that we make sure the money gets to the right folks.
And we can't forget our sponsors who make all of this possible. 100% of your donations go back to folks in need. So we've had a lot of people step up over our time of this foundation. We just put them up on the screen. One of our founders, Diana, I'm a Soap Addict, Salon D, Approved Shield. We mentioned them earlier. Spherex, who built our website in just a couple of days, a great partner of ours. Hustle Athletics, Short Productions, Rich B, Blue Jay, and AK Realty. So again, we really appreciate all of our sponsors that continue to support us and helping us achieve this mission. We now ask you to reflect on one hard question. Are you prepared for the time when you may become a caregiver for a loved one? We believe it takes a village, and sharing is caring. And so with that, we again want to thank our guest, Jennifer, for joining us today, and thank each of you for being here. We want to see you back here next Thursday. We will be having a very special guest who's a friend of DoAsWeDo, James Rex. He's a full-time caregiver for his husband who suffers from Lewy body dementia. So definitely tune in next Thursday to hear his story. And remember, do as we do and have a great weekend. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.